Hiber-Nation 33. Grizzly's Growls presents Stories from the Hiber-Nation. Monarch, the Big Bear of Tallac, by Ernest Thompson Seton, as read by David Grizzly Smith. Part 5. The River Held in the Foothills. There was little of pleasant interest in the next 18 months of Jack's career. His share of the globe was a 20-foot circle around a pole in the yard. The blue hills of the offing, the nearer pine grove, and even the ranch house itself were fixed stars, far away, and sending merely faint suggestions of their splendors to his not very bright eyes. Even the horses and men were outside his little sphere, and related to him about as much as comets are to the earth. The very tricks that had made him valued were being forgotten, as Jack grew up in chains. At first a butter firkin had made him an ample den, but rapidly he passed through the various stages: butter firkin, nail keg, flour barrel, oil barrel, and had now to be graded as a good average hogshead bear, though he was far from filling that big round wooden cavern that formed his latest den. The ranch hotel lay just where the foothills of the Sierras and their groves of live oaks were sloping into the golden plains of the Sacramento. Nature had showered on it every wonderful gift in her lap. A foreground rich with flowers, luxuriant in fruit, shade, and sun, dry pastures, rushing rivers, and murmuring rills were here. Great trees were variants of the view, and the high Sierras to the east overtopped the wondrous plumy forests of their pines with blocks of sculptured blue. Back of the house was a noble river of water from the hills, fouled and chained by sluice and dam, but still a noble stream, whose earliest parent rill had gushed from the grim old Tallac slope. Things of beauty, life, and color were on every side, and yet most sordid of the human race were the folk about the ranch hotel. To see them in this setting might well raise doubt that any rise from nature up to nature's God. No city slum has ever shown a more ignoble crew, and Jack, if his mind were capable of such things, must have graded the two-legged ones lower in proportion as he knew them better. Cruelty was his lot, and hate was his response. About the only amusing trick he now did was helping himself to a drink of beer. He was very fond of beer, and the loafers about the tavern often gave him a bottle to see how dexterously he would twist off the wire and work out the cork. As soon as it popped, he would turn it up between his paws and drink to the last drop. The monotony of his life was occasionally varied with a dog fight. His tormentors would bring their bear dogs to try 'em on the cub. Seemed to be very pleasant sport to men and dogs, till Jack learned how to receive them. At first he used to rush furiously at the nearest tormentor until brought up with a jerk at the end of his chain, and completely exposed to attack behind from another dog. A month or two entirely changed his method. He learned to sit against the hogshead and quietly watch the noisy dogs around him with much show of inattention, making no move, no matter how near they were, until they bunched, that is, gathered in one place. Then he charged. It was inevitable that the hind dogs would be the last to jump, and so hindered the front ones. Thus Jack would get one or more of them, and the game became unpopular. When about 18 months old and half-grown, an incident took place which defied all explanation. Jack had won the name of being dangerous, for he had crippled one man with a blow and nearly killed a tipsy fool who volunteered to fight him. A harmless but good-for-nothing sheep-herder who loafed about the place got very drunk one night and offended some fire-eaters. They decided that, as he had no gun, it would be the proper thing to club him to their heart's content, instead of shooting him full of holes in the manner usually prescribed by their code. Faco Tampico made for the door and staggered out into the darkness. His pursuers were even more drunk, but bent on mischief, they gave chase, and Faco dodged back of the house and into the yard. The mountaineers had just enough wit to keep out of reach of the grizzly as they searched about for their victim, but they did not find him. Then they got torches, and making sure that he was not in the yard, were satisfied that he had fallen into the river behind the barn, and doubtless was drowned. A few rude jokes, and they returned to the house. Well, as they passed the grizzly's den, their lanterns awoke in his eyes a glint of fire. In the morning, the cook, beginning his day, heard strange sounds in the yard. They came from the grizzly's den. "Here, you, lay over there," in sleepy tones, and then a deep, querulous grunting. Well, the cook went as close as he dared and peeped in. Said the same voice in sleepy tones, "Who you crowding, caramba?" And a human elbow was seen jerking and pounding, and again impatient growling in bear-like tones was the response. The sun came up, and the astonished loafers found it was the missing sheep-herder that was in the bear's den, calmly sleeping off his debauch in the very cave of death. The men tried to get him out, but the grizzly plainly showed that they could do so only over his dead body. He charged with vindictive fury at any who ventured near, and when they gave up the attempt, he lay down at the door of the den on guard. At length the sheepherder came to himself, rose up on his elbows, and realizing that he was in the power of the young grizzly, he stepped gingerly over his guardian's back and ran off without even saying thank you. The 4th of July was at hand now, and the owner of the tavern, growing weary of the huge captive in the yard, announced that he would celebrate Independence Day with a grand fight between a picked and fighting range bull and a ferocious California grizzly. The news was spread far and wide by the grapevine telegraph. The roof of the stable was covered with seats at 50 cents each. The hay wagon was half loaded and drawn alongside the corral. Seats here gave a perfect view and were sold at $1 apiece. The old corral was repaired, new posts put in where needed, and first thing in the morning a vicious old bull was herded in and tormented till he was snuffy and extremely dangerous. Jack, meanwhile, had been roped, choked down, and nailed up in his hogshead. His chain and collar were permanently riveted together, so the collar was taken off, as it would be easy to rope him, if need be, after the bull was through with him. The hogshead was rolled over the corral gates, and all was ready. The cowboys come from far and near in their most gorgeous trappings, and the California cowboy is the peacock of his race. The best girls were with them, and farmers and ranchmen came for 50 miles to enjoy the bull and bear fight. Miners from the hills were there, Mexican sheep herders, storekeepers from Placerville, strangers from Sacramento, town and country, mountain and plain were represented. The hay wagon went so well that another was brought into market. The barn roof was sold out. An ominous crack of the timbers somewhat shook the prices, but a couple of strong uprights below restored the market, and all the corners was ready and eager for the great fight. Men who had been raised among cattle were betting on the bull. I tell you, there ain't nothing on earth can face a big range bull that has good use of himself. But the hill men were backing the bear. Pooh! What's a bull to a grizzly? I tell you, I seen a grizzly send a horse clean over the hetchy with one clip of his left. Bull! I'll bet he never show up in the second round. So they wrangled and bet, while burly women, trying to look fetching, gave themselves a variety of airs and were scared at the whole thing, nervous about the uproar, afraid it would be shocking, but really were as keenly interested as the men. All was ready, and the boss of the corner shouted, "Let her go, boys! The house is full and time's up." Well, Faco Tampico had managed to tie a bundle of chaparral thorn to the bull's tail so that the huge creature had literally lashed himself into a frenzy. Jack's hog head, meanwhile, had been rolled out till he was raging with disgust, and Faco, at the word of command, began to pry open the door. The end of the barrel was close to the fence, the door cleared away. Now there was nothing for Jack to do but go forth and claw the bull to pieces. But he did not go. The noise, the uproar, the strangeness of the crowd affected him so that he decided to stay where he was, and the bull backers raised a derisive cry. Their champion came forward bellowing and sniffing, pausing often to paw the dust. He held his head very high and approached slowly until he came within 10 feet of the grizzly's den. Then, giving a snort, he turned and ran to the other end of the corral. Now it was the bear backers' turn to shout. But the crowd wanted a fight, and Faco, forgetful of his debt to Grizzly Jack, dropped a bundle of 4th of July crackers into the hog's head by way of the bong. Crack! And Jack jumped up. Psst, crack, crack, crack. And Jack in surprise rushed forth from his den into the arena. The bull was standing in a magnificent attitude there in the middle, but when he saw the bear spring toward him, he gave 2 mighty snorts and retreated as far as he could, amid cheers and hisses. Perhaps the 2 main characteristics of the grizzly are the quickness with which he makes a plan and the vigor with which he follows it up. Before the bull had reached the far side of the corral, Jack seemed to know the wisest of courses. His pig-like eyes swept the fence in a flash, took in the most climbable part, the place where a crosspiece was nailed on in the middle. In 3 seconds he was there, in 2 seconds he was over, and in 1 second he dashed through the running, scattering mob and was making for the hills as fast as his strong and supple legs could carry him. Women screamed, men yelled, and dogs barked. There was a wild dash for the horses, tied far from the scene of the fight, to spare their nerves. But the grizzly had 300 yards start, 500 yards even, and before the gala mob gave out a long and flying column of reckless, riotous riders, the grizzly had plunged into the river, a flood no dog cared to face, and had reached the chaparral and the broken ground in line for the piney hills. In an hour, the ranch hotel, with its galling chain, its cruelties, and its brutal human beings, was a thing of the past. Shut out by the hills of his youth, cut off by the river of his cubhood, the river grown from the rill, born in his birthplace, away in Tallac's pines. The 4th of July was a glorious 4th. It was Independence Day for Grizzly Jack. Thank you for listening to Stories from the Hiber-Nation. Comment on the website at grizzliesgrowls.com. This program is offered under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.